Okay, so now we have our complete GUI interface and we want to add some functionality to this program. Specifically, when the user enters the temperature in degrees Celsius, we'll click the calculate button and a couple of things will happen. The degrees Fahrenheit will be computed, and then the result will be displayed to the user in that invisible label that we talked about, which is right about here. So back in our code, you saw that we have all three buttons in place. And we're going to focus on the calculate button functionality. And I'm going to obviously add the functionality to this program in the form of a few lines of code. I'm not just going to throw that into the program haphazardly. I'm going to put it into a sub. We talked about what a sub is. It's like a part of your program, like a little program within your program that has its own very specific job to do. So I'm going to begin by typing a sub. Let's call this tempCalc _ click. This is the sub that's going to run when the user clicks that tempCalc button. And I told you a sub, you can think of it like a sandwich. You want to start with your keyword sub, and then of course throw in an end sub, so it's like you're laying out the bread for the sandwich, and then we'll type inside the sandwich. Okay, so you'll notice a certain pattern in all the programs that we do this week and next week, and even in our program, the previous temperature program, when we were working in the text window, you notice there was always like the first thing we got the user's input, or we will get the user's input, okay, and then we perform the calculation, and then the third step was to display the result to the user. Okay, so that 1, 2, 3 approach is going to keep coming up for us again and again and again. So let's start with number 1. We want to get the user's input. Now, this is not a console application, so like I said, text window is not going to be a part of this program. We are going to get that user's input out of the text box, okay? But like with the console application, when we get that user's input, even though it's coming out of a text box and not from the console, when we get that user's input, we're going to put it into a variable. So why don't we call the variable cells, because it's going to hold the user's input, which is in degrees Celsius in this program. And here's how we get the user's input from a text box. We call upon FC controls, and then you'll see this get text method, get text. That method allows us to reach into that text box and pick that value out. So we have to provide the name of the text box that we're talking about. In this case, it's TXT cells, our text box in this program. Now that I have the degrees Celsius, I can compute the degrees Fahrenheit and ultimately display it to the user, or display the degrees Fahrenheit to the user. So now we're on step 2, where we're doing the calculation. And this will be almost identical to the previous program, except recall that we're going from Celsius to Fahrenheit in this particular program, not vice versa. So again, when I compute the result, I'm going to put that result into a variable. Why don't we call this variable Fair? Because it's going to, the result of the equation is going to be temperature in degrees Fahrenheit. So the formula, and this is another popular formula that you can see anywhere on the internet or even in a math or science book, is the degrees Celsius times 9/5 plus 32. Okay, and you know what, the arithmetic order of operations, it's not something they have to worry about in this particular formula. This is the natural order of the equation, and the result will be just fine. So let's go to step 3 now, which would be to display the result to the user. So for that, we'll do FC controls dot set text. Okay, where are we going to put the result? In that invisible label that we talked about. It's invisible when the program starts running, but once we have an answer, which we do at this point, we want to put that answer into the label. So that label is called LBL Fair, as an LBL Fahrenheit label. And what are we going to set it to? Here we're going to construct a sentence using concatenation, just like we did in the console application. So we'll say cells, this value coming from our variable, our Celsius variable. This is the original value in degrees Celsius that the user entered. Cells, and then we'll hard code part of the English language of the sentence. I'll just put C to cut it short. Degrees Celsius is, and then we will concatenate to that the degrees Fahrenheit, and then finish off the sentence with something like that. Okay? Recall, that is called concatenation, when you're building your output string piece by piece. So this is our concatenation here. And the result, that sentence, is going to go into LBL Fair. Okay, you'll also hear a chime when you play my program that's posted. You can do that. You can take it or leave it. I don't really care one way or another, but this is how you would play that particular noise. So I'm going to run this. We'll say 0 degrees Celsius. I'm expecting 32 degrees Fahrenheit, right? Well, nothing's happening because we skipped one very important step. We need to wire it up behind the scenes, and we've talked about this before. We have to register the mouse down event for this button and connect it to the sub that we just coded. So I'm going to, maybe squeeze in here in the code, and we'll say FC controls register mouse down event. Okay, that's not the first time we've seen that in this class. And we are registering tempCalc, that's the calculate button. And which sub are we connecting this button to? Well, the one right below it here, the tempCalc click. Maybe I'll just even copy that. But you have to put the subname in quotes. Okay, now things are all wired up, and we'll go ahead and run it. And there you have it. In the last video, we'll do the clear button and the close button.